Hello and welcome back to Private Paint Party on YouTube. I'm Carrie and I'm going to be walking you through a lovely beach scene painting today. For all of you who, like me, love coastal decor, nautical themes, that kind of thing, makes a lovely painting for hanging up in your house. We're painting in acrylics. I've got 3 brushes here. I've got small, medium, large. There's the small. I like the flats for the big and the medium, and a pointed round for my small. Acrylic paints. We are painting with a set by Winsor & Newton. And let me show you that here. Here's the set. I have a few out because I wanted to show you the ones I didn't put out. So these are all the ones I did. Everything in the set except the cad yellow, the cad red, and the raw umber, because we don't need it today. I don't want to waste paint, so I didn't put them out. I've got a water cup, brushes, like I said, paints, and palette. You could use a paper plate for all that really matters. But there you go. Oops, my white's dripping. But those are the colors we're using. And if you want to know more about supplies, go back and watch the beginning of my octopus painting how-to, or the shorter video I made just about the supplies was an excerpt from that octopus painting. So if you're not sure what to buy, you're looking for a little advice, go back and listen to me yammer on longer there. But hopefully now you've got your supplies in front of you and you're excited and ready to start painting this beautiful nautical beach scene with me. So let's just dive right in. So let me show you what we're going to do. There's only the most minimal amount of drawing in this painting, which is kind of awesome. It's a very relaxing, easy painting in my opinion, and I think the results always come out very beautifully. So I've got my smallest brush. I dipped into the ultramarine blue, which is the darker of the 2 blues in this set. And what I want to do is I want to kind of section this canvas off into quarters. And I don't need to put my dot in the middle this time. I just need to make little notations to myself on the sides. And it does not have to be perfect. You can certainly tell that from what I just did. Just kind of roughly figuring out where halfway is. Yeah, that's about right. Next, I want to cut my halves in half again. I'm going to go, okay, there. And down here, I feel like about here. I'm going to dip my brush in a touch more water and touch more paint. With acrylics, you just got to get a feel for how much water to paint ratio on your brush, but you always need a little water to keep things smooth and flowing. But you don't want so much that's dripping everywhere. So you'll just get a sense of that, just a quick dip and then over. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. That's really all I got to do for this beginning part. I've already composed my painting. It's pretty easy. The first part, I'll have you connect this top line. That's going to be the line between the ocean and the sky. And obviously the horizon is actually pretty straight, not all wobbly like my line is here, but you can tell it doesn't matter too much. Not at this phase of the painting. We're just roughing in our sections. There you go. And now I'm going to take this line here, my halfway down, my second quarter section, and I'm going to connect it diagonally down to this one, the 3/4 down on the right hand side. You could go the other way if you want your beach scene to, angle the opposite side. Feel free. You can do however you want. And that said, if all you can do is straight line, do a diagonal, that's great. That's wonderful. Do it. But if you want to give it just a little bit of curve, little extra something like that, that's wonderful too. That's going to be your shoreline where the surf meets the sand. And look at that. We've drawn out our painting. Okay. So now I'm going to put my small brush back in my water cup, kind of rinse it out, and then I usually just kind of lean it on my rag. I usually don't want to just leave it in the water cup because then it will point the end of the brush too much just by leaning on itself. So kind of rinse it out and leave it over here on the rag. And now I'm switching to my biggest, fattest brush. That would be my large, flat brush. Got it a little bit wet, picking up that same blue that we just used, the ultramarine. And I'm gonna show you how to make a quick, beautiful sky. Check it out, I'm kind of bisecting once again. This is my sky space, and I'm cutting it up into 2 parts, and I'm gonna fill in the top half of my sky with this wonderful ultramarine blue. Ultramarine is got just the tiniest touch of purple. It's on the warm side of things for blues. And the sky, usually as it goes higher, of course, depends on the weather and where you're at and everything, but it tends to get a little warmer, a little more purpley towards the top. And the horizon down here, horizon being where the sky meets the sea or the land, the earth, that's where it's usually lighter in the sky. So that's why I've got my blue here in the top half. Then I've got a lot of blue on my brush, so I'm just gonna kind of swirl it around my water, tap, tap over on the rag. You can't quite see that, can you? There you go. Tap, maybe once again, get a little off. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean because my colors are gonna blend anyway. Next, I'm gonna get a pretty good amount of white on my brush, and check it out. This might seem silly, putting white on top of an already white canvas, but first of all, you can see it's already picking up some blue. And we are going to fill in that bottom half of the sky that I just cut into 2 parts. Filling the bottom half in with this white that's already picking up some blue. And hey, check it out. This is kind of giving me a chance to straighten my lines just a little bit. And there you go. Now we've got white and blue. And now I just go back and forth, up and down, back and forth, up and down. And I get a lovely, lovely gradient, meaning it's going from dark to light, which is how the sky usually goes. So just take some time going back and forth with your brush. The key to this is big, long, loose brush strokes. If you feel like you've got a little too much paint or too much water in your brush, you might need to kind of dab, dab, dab over on the rag. And probably the biggest risk here is overblending, which I feel like I actually just did. So that's good because I can show you what not to do, right? And show you how to fix it. So now I've kind of blended so much that there isn't much difference between the bottom of the sky and the top. It all is getting to be almost the same blue. But I still want it to be a darker blue, the ultramarine there, and I want it to be more white down there. So I'm gonna kind of wipe off the excess paint of my brush. I don't even really need to clean it because I'm still working with the same colors. I'm gonna pick up a little more white. Coming in here down at the bottom of the sky. Lightening a bit. Wiping my brush off, cleaning it a bit. Using an old t-shirt for a rag. That's great use, especially if you got kids that are constantly growing out of things. Okay, there's that ultramarine blue. Back on my brush. And I'm not afraid of getting a little too thick with my paint here. It makes the sky kind of nice and juicy and creamy and luscious, and you kind of need it to have a fair amount of paint so that when you are blending here, you've got enough to work with and it doesn't dry too quick on you. That's kind of the risk here with acrylic paints. But there you go. I kind of got my lights and my dark back. I'm liking how it's looking. I hope you're liking how yours is looking. I like these brush strokes that are in there. I think they kind of hint at clouds and atmosphere in the sky. So don't worry about perfection, doing a smooth, perfect gradient. I actually think sometimes that takes away from some of the realism. So leave the brush strokes. They work for you. If there's too much, of course, you can just keep going back and forth to smooth them out a little bit. But yeah, stop when you're happy. Stop while you're ahead. It should be a nice, easy, smooth, relaxing step. So next we got to do the sand, which means I need the same big brush, but the sand, I don't want any blue to get in it because the blue with the yellow makes green, right? So I'm going to really, really swirl and rinse my brush out. If you even need to go to the sink to rinse it out, you can, or go get Another big brush. Sometimes it's helpful. I say small, medium, and large is all you need, the 3 brushes, but sometimes it's nice to have 2 or 3 of each one. Then you can have one for light colors and one for dark, one for blue tones, which is cool tones, or warm tones, which are the yellows and reds. And that way you can kind of keep them separate so they don't mix too much. But up to you. I just used the same brush, but I cleaned it fairly well. So let's see if I cleaned it good enough. Next, I'm going to pick up this color, which is the yellow ochre. It kind of looks like gold on your palette. I think it's just beautiful for sand. Now, I'm just filling in everything under my sea line, shoreline, surf line, whatever we want to call it. And I know it looks way too golden, right? There's probably only a few beaches in the world that are this golden. Don't worry, this is not the end of it. This is just sort of part A of this step. But we want to go ahead and just fill in this whole area where the sand is going to be. And look at that. See, I was able to cover over my little line there, my little blue 1/4 line. I don't really need that one. And it already dried, which means the next layer will go already on top of it. Again, touch of water, keep things flowing. Fast and loose is perfectly a-okay for this step. You're going to see a lot of like brush strokes and lines in there. Don't worry about that. The next step, we'll get rid of it, because obviously we might not quite see that texture in the sand. Okay, so we want to do this next part fairly quick because you want to catch this before it dries without even cleaning my brush, my big brush. I'm just going to dip right back into my white, get white on my brush, and check it out. Oh, doesn't that look lovely? Beautiful, luscious sand color. I'm just letting the white mix the gold right there on my canvas. I could have pre-mixed this over on the palette, I suppose, gotten it exactly the color I want, but sometimes I feel like it's more fun. Kind of gives you a little bit more interest if you mix things in process right here on the canvas. That is totally up to you. If you would prefer to mix the white plus the yellow ochre, that's what this step is. You can mix that on your canvas, on your palette beforehand. Feel free. But I like doing it this way. Part of it is I think I just find these big, broad brush strokes so nice and relaxing. And the other thing is, I'm not quite sure how light or dark I want it, right? If I'm not quite sure, sometimes I don't know until I see it. And what's nice about this is I can keep adding white bit by bit till I like it. Or maybe I have the opposite going on. Maybe I'm like, oh no, it's too light. I want a really golden sand beach. I can always come in with more yellow ochre, mix it in. So it's up to you. I suppose it depends which beach you're painting, right? Are you painting a really golden sand beach in Hawaii? Do you want more of a California beach? They're often a lot lighter, more white mixed in. But just go back and forth, kind of up here. I have to kind of go a little slower, hug my shoreline. Back and forth till you're happy with it. And I already need to pour out more white, so do that too if you need it. All right, I had to pour out just a smidge more white. Ran out of it already, which is not too surprising between the sky and this sand step, using a lot of it. But look how sort of rich and creamy the paint looks. I like this technique because I feel like it almost makes the the acrylic paint look a little more like oils, just a little thicker and creamier. It's because I like to paint with oils some of the time too. But really, it's up to you. Just don't be afraid to go a little thick with these 2 steps. Yeah. All right, I'm pretty happy with mine. How about you? Feel free to take as little or as long as you need on this step. Next step is to go in and do the ocean. We're going to do a very similar technique as we did with this step, sort of a dark and a light and blending together to get a gradient where it kind of blends dark to light. We're going to do that with that same dark blue, but then also with the cerulean blue and a little bit of phthalo green to give us some beautiful luscious turquoises. So go ahead and rinse your brush out real good again. Lots of swirling around, dabbing on your rag, or switch to another big brush if you got it handy. But I'm just having to clean pretty good because I'm going back into blue tones, cool tones. So I want to get that yellow ochre, yellow sand color off my big brush. All right. And like I said, a very similar step here as the sky. I'm going to get that same blue, that darker ultramarine blue, and that's going to go in the back, the top half of my ocean. Now, you'll see I'm going a little slower, a little more careful than I have in the first two steps. That's just because this is now my opportunity to fix my horizon line and get it kind of straighter than I did in the past. This is probably the only line in the whole painting that needs to be straight. This horizon line now, where the sea meets the sky. You can see it gets like a little bit taller, kind of creeps up into the sky as I try to fix it. A little bit further back. That's okay though, because my sky kind of crept down as I mixed it together. All right. I like that, but I made it a little too messy up here. So I'm going to show you a trick. Switching to my medium brush, getting a little white back on brush. It's nice because I haven't used this medium brush yet, so it's actually completely clean. And by kind of getting that while the ocean line is still wet, I was able to kind of straighten it, fix it. Now I might have added a little more white than I wanted back in my sky, but that's okay. I can get a hint of blue and kind of redo some of my gradient. This is not a real step. This is Carrie messed up and I needed to fix it. But hey, I hope that helps you in case you have the same issue as me, had a hard time getting this straight. You can always just come back with the medium brush, something smaller you have a little more control over, kind of fix the sky, and that helps you get a straighter line. And there you go. I might come back now with my medium brush and go kind of slower. And kind of fix that line. Good enough. I think that looks all right. So back to my bigger brush. When you've got a bigger area of canvas to paint, you just pick the brush proportionate to it. Big area, big brush. So now I'm going to get that cerulean blue. I kind of rinsed off my ultramarine, but I didn't make it perfectly clean brush because the two colors are going to blend together anyway. So that's the lighter of the two. It's a slightly more turquoisey, cool shade blue, meaning it has a little bit of yellows and greens in it. And I am just now going to kind of fill in everywhere that's left in my ocean space. Notice that I didn't really tell you an exact spot or ratio, how far down to come with that ultramarine blue in your ocean. You just want to kind of get the back, I don't know, quarter, third, half. Oh, uh-oh. All right, this is going to be a learning opportunity. I'll show you how to fix that. Sometimes I try to swipe up, grab the drips real quick, stop them before they become worse. Sometimes I let them stay because it's almost easier to let it dry and then just paint over it. And I think that's what I'm going to choose in this case, since all this sand paint is still kind of wet. I don't want to have to just redo all of it. As I try to scoop up that drip, it would probably mess up a lot of the rest of the paint. I'd end up having to redo the whole area. So I'm actually going to let that dry, and then I'll come back and I'll remix a little gold and white and kind of get that on top of there. So I'm just going to focus on filling in the rest of the canvas, all with my beautiful cerulean blue. And notice as I get closer to the back area here, the darker blue, the ultramarine, I'm kind of going back and forth, back and forth. I'm letting them blend together. I think it makes a really beautiful tone for our ocean. Now, I messed up the sky just a little bit more back there. I kind of got rid of my straight line again. Again, that's okay. Acrylic painting is all about layers. There's sort of this push and pull. Put too much on, take some away. Put too much on, take some away, back and forth. I think I'm actually going to let it dry up there too before I try to fix it this time. But there you go. You've got a beautiful lay-in for a lovely coastal ocean nautical looking painting here. So I'm hoping you're feeling good about this. You should be, because we're already about halfway done with this painting. It's a really nice, relaxing, chill one. All right, now without even rinsing my brush off too much, I'm just gonna take kind of the tip of it and dip into my phthalo green over here. See that? And I love this color. I think it's beautiful, but it can be kind of powerful. So I'm going to put a little bit into the cerulean, see if I like it. Nice. Might be a little too powerful. So then I can come back with some of the cerulean over top. And this is entirely subjective, up to you. You know, are you painting a Caribbean ocean scene, the Bahamas or something, Hawaii, tropical, or are you going for East Coast, I don't know, Cape Cod, Maine? If so, you would keep the green out of it. You wouldn't do much green in that if you're kind of going for more of those foggy coastal scenes. But I like it, just a touch in there with the blue. All right, and now we're going to switch to our medium brush. Just kind of rinsing to make sure I didn't get any blue water too much in it. Tap, tap on my rag to get rid of excess water. And now we're going to do sort of the sea foam or the surf. So I've got a decent amount of white, maybe a little too much. I might just rub some of that back off. And here's the trick. This is maybe the most tricky part of this whole painting. I'm going to use kind of the edge. So notice I'm not going this way, the fat side of my brush. I'm going on the skinnier side, the edge of it. And right now, I'm just sort of following my outline, covering up the line of where the blue meets the gold, where the sea meets the sand, and putting some white right there. All right. And for now, that is all we need to do, because we're going to let it dry a little bit. I'm rinsing my brush off. I'm coming back, getting a touch of white, and this is kind of my opportunity. While that dries, I can come back. Probably the 10th time I've done this, right? But that's okay. come back, get a little light white in my sky. Back and forth, back and forth. Trying to get that horizon line straight again. And now I got a little too much white down here in the ocean, in my opinion. So I rinsed out my medium brush, grabbing a little of that blue again. Notice the paint is starting to dry back there. So you kind of got to be a little careful because you don't want it to mess up what you got going on. If it feels like it needs to just fully dry before you touch it, that's fine too. But there you go. I think I fixed that in just about enough. My horizon line, my line where the sky meets the sea, is not super crisp, and that's okay. It can be, but it also could be like this if you want. That actually gives a little bit of what they call atmospheric perspective. You know, feels like things that are off in the distance are a bit hazy, fuzzy. So if you were, you know, lucky or more skilled than me, and you got a perfect, nice, crisp line the first time around, leave it. Be happy with it. Don't fuss over it too much. Don't go into it too much, just like I did probably. But if it's a little soft like that, if that's the best you can do to get a straight line, that's wonderful too, and that gives you a good effect. And that way it's not really an issue if it's not a perfect line, if it's a little bit hazy, if that makes sense. The one thing you don't want is you don't want a really perfect crisp line here, but then it's super curved or a little wobbly and not straight. If you have a super straight crisp line that's kind of popped out, not at all fuzzy or blended, you better make it straight, if that makes sense. But yeah, got a good effect. How's this? I think that's at a point where I could kind of work on that now. I'm going to kind of dab, 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 just get rid of the excess. Look at that, not too bad, right? And what I'm going to do, cleaning my big brush out really, really good, I'm going to get some white. I'm going to get some yellow ochre, the colors that we mixed for the sand. This time I am pre-mixing them on the palette just because I kind of already like how I've got it up there and I don't want to risk messing it up too much. But of course I'm not going to be able to perfectly match it. I'm just going to get something close, approximate. And I'm going to have to get it thick enough so I have more to work with. That'll help me. And even that little bit of blue that got in my brush, not a big deal when I've got enough of the gold paint. There you go. See? Nothing is ever ruined. You can always fix things with acrylic. All right, now switching back to my medium brush, really rinsing it off, dabbing it over there on my rag. I'm going to come back, get some white on it again, and I'm going to show you a fun technique over here. I'm going to start my brush where the surf is. I'm going to start pulling some lines out into the rest of the ocean. Kind of keeping them, you know, sort of horizontal, parallel to our horizon line, because that's how the waves are, but not perfect, right? Because there's a little bit of wiggle and wobble there. But all I'm doing is some little white lines. I'm going kind of light with it in terms of the amount of paint that I've got on my brush. I don't have so much that it's making a really strong white line. Just making it kind of go lightly on top there. And next, now that this had a little chance to dry, that original white I put in, that is, now I'm going to come back for a second pass, because the part I do want to be nice and bright white is the part right there at the edge where the surf meets the sand. And notice I'm letting myself kind of break up the straight lines there and kind of start to wiggle and wobble a bit in that area as well. You might need to pour out more white for yourself for this painting. It's probably the #1 color we're using the most. Don't be afraid to have a little bit more. If it picks up a little, the blue behind it or the sand color right here, don't worry. See, I just kind of kept going back and forth over it, and then it blended together. In fact, it's probably a teeny bit more realistic that way, right? So once I've got a couple more layers on that and I'm happy with it, I'm kind of going like this, little soft touch with my brush as I just sort of pull some of that white back into the ocean like that. Notice I'm not going all the way back here with my white lines. I don't really want to do that because with the ocean, as it gets further off in the distance, even if there are those little white caps and swells, you don't really see them. We don't want to draw attention to them, or they're so tiny. I guess you could come back with your little white, small round brush if you wanted to, but for now, I think they'd just sort of be a distraction. I kind of just want to focus on this being the foreground, what's closest to us. Okay. I think it looks pretty good. Definitely I want to come back and do a little bit more on it, especially here where it picked up a lot of the color underneath, because that color underneath wasn't completely dry, the blue of the sand. But at this point, if I just kept putting white over it, it would just become a little bit too much of a big gloopy globby mess. So I'm going to let it dry before I attack it with any more white now. And we'll move over to another step to kind of buy us some time in here for this to dry. And then we'll come back with a few more layers of color. And I just think it's beautiful. I think we're going to make a really gorgeous seascape ocean right here. And this next step is something of a detail that I guess you could leave out, but I just always feel like something's missing if it's not there. And I'm getting my yellow ochre on my medium brush here, kind of starting to mix it over here. What it is a little bit of the sand being darker right here underneath the white foam surf part. You know, there's always like a patch of sand, at least for those of you that have lived by the beach before. There's always this wet sand, right? From the water pulling in and out, back and forth. And it's darker. It's a darker patch of sand. Now, a lot of times it's just brown, which is kind of ugly. But it does sort of glisten in the sun. And sometimes I see it making this beautiful, beautiful kind of purpley brown color. And so that's what I want to go for today, because I want to keep my colors, you know, really beautiful and bright. And sometimes you can kind of enhance nature that way a little bit, right? So I've got my yellow ochre, which is what the base color that we made the sand with. I didn't add any white to it this time, just pure yellow ochre and starting. And I've got, see, about that much of our darker brown color, our raw umber. And I'm mixing that in, and that would make that darker brown. But like I said, I want it to be a little bit purpley. So this is probably the most you're going to mix of this whole painting right here. 4 different colors. I'll show you just so you can kind of see. If I just did yellow ochre and a touch of the raw umber, I get something like that, which is not bad. That actually looks about right for nature. But like I said, I want to make it a little prettier, a little more reflective of the light and beautiful in its color. So now I'm getting a little of my rose color, mixing that in, and a touch, teeny touch. You have to just go really light with this, with that ultramarine blue. That's the blue that has a touch of purple in it. Getting that in. You can always dip more and add more, but that blue is pretty powerful, so it'll tint the color really quickly if you do too much. I don't mind adding a little bit more rose though. And you just kind of go back and forth till you get a color that you're pretty happy with. And now I just want to get a touch of white because I feel like mine's coming out a little dark. Just a teeny bit. All right. So what I want to do, I've got my medium brush. You can use your medium or your small. It just depends on how heavy-handed you tend to be and what feels best for you. If you have more control with the small brush, that's totally fine. It's just going to take a little longer to fill it in. If you're like me, kind of like the medium, notice I kind of use the side of it there. You can do that. And see what I'm doing is I'm essentially just sort of, I guess you could call it underlining or outlining the surf, where the sea meets the sand, the shoreline for now. And it's kind of this purpley brown color. Hopefully you can kind of see. Again, I could have gotten away with just that yellow ochre with a touch of raw umber, but I like to add a little rose, a little blue, just to give it a little more life. Color. Okay. Need a little more water, keep it wet and flowing. Okay, something like that. Getting there. I think that's going to definitely pop our ocean forward, bring some love and attention to it there. I do think right now it looks a little funny. It looks just like an outline, right? And we don't want that. This, you know, the shape of this sort of shadow wet sand area is probably going to be different in places because the water kind of comes in and out differently every time. So I just got a touch more water. I had to be careful. It almost dripped. So don't get too much. Maybe just one dab in the water and then tap, tap on the rag to get rid of excess. But I just made it a little wetter. And I'm kind of coming in here. And I'm going to make this line a little thicker. And also, you know, I'm going to kind of play with the shape. Make it a little different. Not exactly a complete underline outline of what's above it. I want to give it some shape of its own, some differentiation. I don't have a lot of the actual paint on my brush, although I did dab just a little bit, got some more, got some water, so that I don't have nothing on my brush. I want to have a little something, but a lot of it is water now. Kind of almost doing a watercolor technique just to keep it kind of light and not too heavy-handed and dark. And there you go. What do you think? I kind of like it, although I want to show you one more kind of little quick advanced trick. Again, if you're happy with things, or if you're afraid to mess things up, leave it. Skip this. Don't do the extra detail if you've got something wonderful that you're loving. You don't want to take the risk of messing it up. That's my opinion anyway. But if you're kind of up for a challenge, you're ready to try something new, let me just show you one little extra bonus point that you can do. I've got my rag. I've got a place that doesn't have any paint on it, wet paint. And before this dries, watch this. I think this is so fun. I'm just kind of wiping some of it away. There you go. I don't know if you can even tell. It's a pretty, like I said, pretty small detailed trick, but I like it. I think that just kind of gives it a softer touch. It's kind of a cheater's way to blend. You just use a rag or a paper towel instead of blending with brushes. And that way, you know, it's not all just one flat kind of outlining. Now it really does sort of feel more like the texture of sand. Some of it's starting to dry, some of it's still very wet and dark. And yeah, I think personally it just sort of brings the composition to life. So I hope you like that. I want to show you one other fun little bonus point that you can do. Definitely don't have to. Some might think this is too cheesy, but if you're trying to personalize it, while you have that wonderful color mixed up, get your color on your small brush and check it out. It also works to make it look like somebody has carved something into the sand. Maybe initials. I kind of like the heart thing. And I'm just taking that same color I had just mixed, drawing whatever I want to draw, but you know, kind of bigger, simpler shapes, because it's hard to draw detail in the sand, right? And then it wouldn't really look like something somebody drew in the sand. And then same thing for the bonus trick. If you're happy with it like that, leave it. But if you're like me, I just kind of want to wipe it a little bit. I think that makes it look a little teeny bit more natural and organic, like somebody really did carve that into the sand. Doesn't look as much like somebody just drew something on top. You notice I kind of let it get a little messy. That doesn't bother me. Anyway, completely optional step there, but I just wanted to show it to you while we had this color mixed up before it dries on your palette. You know, you want to go ahead and use it. So honestly, you have all the big steps pretty much were there, but what will bring this sort of to a final wonderful finished feeling is the last little details that we're going to add in here. So follow along with me if you like. If you're happy with your painting as it is now, call it done. This can be a quick, fast paint and sip for those of you that like that kind of thing. I am cleaning my medium brush out really well, and I'll show you. We have to go a little more light-handed now with our technique, meaning not too thick with the paint, not pressing too hard with the brush, almost like a watercolorist. We're just going to kind of go light with some stuff. So I'm going to just start playing with some really beautiful spectrum of colors in here in the middle part of the ocean to really bring those waves to life. So first, I've got my phthalo green there on my brush. And over here on a place of my palette where it's dry, no other wet paint is around, I'm just going to kind of wipe some of my brush off. I should put my rag back so you can see. I'm kind of wiping on the rag, wiping on the palette. So I'm just sort of light with it. I don't know if you can see it now on my brush, but there's not that much of it there. Like I did the paint, I did the water, did the rag. So just a little bit. And now notice I'm going right over top some of these white lines, surf lines that I did earlier. And I do tend to have to sort of dab back into this little watery paint area on my palette a lot to keep adding more to my brush. But that kind of lets that blend in, makes it look a little less cartoony, our brush strokes. Yeah, look at that. I like it personally. You can kind of slowly add more and more. That's kind of what I was doing. I was a little hesitant with it at first. Wasn't quite sure how much I wanted. Then I got a little bit more on my brush coming back in. And remember, worst case scenario, don't like it, wipe some of it back with the rag real quick. You can catch some of it and get rid of it. You can also come back with your ultramarine blue and your cerulean blue to cover anything you don't like there too. Speaking of, I'm getting some cerulean right here on my brush, kind of doing the same thing where I'm gonna make sure there's not too much on my brush. Make it a touch watery but not dripping, so dabbing on my rag. And I'm just gonna kind of mix some of that in to the middle ocean part too. Again, I'm not going up into this ultramarine. I like that. I want to just sort of leave it alone, not mess it up too much. That darker blue that ultramarine I was just talking about is what makes the ocean feel like it's sitting off in the distance in the back. And then we want the more turquoisey cerulean blues and greens being closer to us. Gives it more of a sense of space and depth that way. All right, but I got a little more cerulean on my brush just because there were some spots that I wanted to go over a bit. Look at that. I think it's looking lovely. All that was a little phthalo green and a little cerulean blue, light-handedly going over some reliefs, letting some of that white still show through. All right, now I'm switching back to my smallest brush, so I have a little more control and detail. And now I got some white on it, and this is where I can go back and make some of this surf pop, really, as it comes out closest to us. Notice I'm letting my paint be really thick here. Totally up to you on how you want to do that. That's just kind of one, maybe even cheater's little technique there at the end for highlighting things. Kind of, if you have something that's closer to you and you want it to sort of pop forward in terms of the depth perception and distance and all that, if you go a little thicker with your paint, it just adds to that effect. It'll catch the eye, kind of pop out at you. So I'm not going over this whole thing. If I did, it would probably look too outliney. I'm just doing some parts. But now, while I still have some white on my brush, but I'm also going to just dab some of it back so it's not too heavy-handed, not as thick as I just did the other. I'm going to kind of drag some more. Kind of pull back some of these lines. Some of the lines that I had just painted over, kind of maybe took away a few too many. Again, this is the push and the pull of acrylic painting. Back and forth. Yeah, just kind of getting a few little details, mostly at the foreground, meaning the part in the space closest to us in this painting. You have foregrounds, you have backgrounds, you have middle grounds. And I'm mostly keeping my stronger white details to the foreground. Here and there, kind of pulling it back in from the surf to the rest of the ocean. Don't mind my dog barking in the distance there, sorry. He's just decided now it's time to come in. He's done with his backyard time. I'll get him here in a second. So there's really just one little thing left for me, at least. I am hoping you're feeling the same way. I'm happy with mine. If you're not happy with yours, really you just go back and you redo whatever step is in the area that's bugging you. If it's this, keep working in white, phthalo greens, cerulean blue, back and forth, lines, blending brushes till you're happy with it. The ultramarine blue back there, the sky. If you want to put clouds, you put a little white on your brush and sort of blend it, fan it out. If you do sort of too exact, too cloud-like, you know, what we have that idea of a cloud in our brain anyway, it ends up looking really cartoony. So you can just sort of hint at it. But yeah, a little white if you want the more cloudy day. But one final finishing step that I think always brings it to life, makes it look really nice at the end. And again, you don't have to do it. You can just be done if you're done. But I think a little of that rose on your medium brush, a teeny touch of the ultramarine blue makes a beautiful, beautiful purple. See that? And I didn't mix up a ton because I don't need a ton, but check it out. I'm just going to put a little bit right on top of my horizon line where the ocean meets the sky back there. And I'm going to let that purple just kind of blend on top, sit on top of my ultramarine blue. Look at that, kind of gave me a chance to make a slightly straighter line for myself there. This may not show up in the video or on YouTube as much as it's showing up for me in real life. It's kind of a subtle color, but it really sort of catches the light. Also, purple tends to be one of the more transparent colors out there. Now, you could get all into color theory and paint and pigment science and all that and learn which colors are more opaque, meaning sort of you can't see through them. They go on sort of flat and solid, and which are more transparent, almost like stained glass, right? And purple is one of the more transparent ones, meaning it's great for just sort of what they call glazing on a little extra layer of color. It doesn't actually change the color in terms of the shape and drawing of it underneath. It lets that ultramarine blue still stay there, live there, but it's almost like, I don't know, putting blush on with your makeup, right? It just sort of gives extra color without painting over. So I like that little detail. Take it or leave it. You do not have to do it if you don't want. But I think it just really kind of gives us a fun rainbow effect, especially if you're doing more of a Hawaiian type of ocean scene. Tends to be a little bit more rainbowy in its colors. California oceans, a little more like deeper blues and grays, I would say. A little less the turquoise and purple, but I love it. I think it's beautiful. I think it kind of creates a nice finishing touch there. I am happy with my painting. I'm hoping you're feeling the same. And really, that's it. Like I said, you could have been done anywhere in those last 10 or 15 minutes of steps. You just kind of do what looks good to you and learn to stop when you're ahead. Yeah, I like it. I hope you're happy with yours. Thank you so much for painting with me today. Again, my name is Carrie, and this is Private Paint Party on YouTube, and kind of still starting out. This is our third painting together, I believe. Yeah. So anyway, those likes and subscribes certainly help the channel grow and will help me to be able to create one of these a week, like my plan. And I try to put new ones up by Friday night each week. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.